Welcome to a live episode of Surviving the Survivor. We bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to our special live coverage out of Orlando of the Sarah Boone trial. Yet to really get underway with jury selection. That kicked off this morning. We're going to discuss that in a minute. I can tell you, I'm about 2 football fields away from the Orange County Courthouse, and a beautiful courthouse. Never been inside it before. Excuse me. A massive place with a lot going on. Passport office, you name it. They've got it inside the Orange County Courthouse, and an incredibly tight security system to go through there. Belts off. Shoes off for some people. The whole rigmarole feels like you're in an airport. So we're going to break this down today. 2 new guests. One is on the way, excuse me, and a returning guest. And without further ado, Jessica Mishali. She is a criminal defense attorney out of Boca Raton. Very successful at defending her sometimes criminal clients, not in her eyes though. And she's been joining us on the show, and she just had a very high profile not guilty verdict in the Marcia Thompson case, which I want to talk about tonight, because Jessica did a similar defense to what will be used here, or at least what we're expecting to be used in the Sarah Boone case. I think we've got our other guest, Mark Najami. I'm going to bring him in here. Hey, Mark, how are you?
I'm well. Sorry, we weren't set up for Firefox or whatever, so we are now. Sorry about that.
No worries at all. So right on cue, Mark Najami, if he looks familiar, it's because he's all over your TV set. Used to do analysis for George Zimmerman, for Casey Anthony, you name it. He's an Orlando-based attorney, very successful, does a lot of philanthropy. Great to have Mark join us here. Thanks, Mark. And of course, last but not least, Ryan Vescio. He's been a state attorney for 15 years. Is that right, Ryan Vescio?
I was. In my former life, I've been out of that office for the last 5.
And now are you doing criminal defense?
I represent crime victims, both in the state of Florida in proceedings, and then represent victims of crime across the country in various matters.
All right. So just for full transparency, just got here from the courthouse, I think I was saying, and it's a total kerfuffle, if I may use that word, here at Orlando headquarters for Surviving the Survivor for the next few days. So I've got this camera in a cockamamie position. And bear with me while I try to figure this out. So, Mark, to you, I mean, you know this town better than anybody. You've been here probably longer than you want me to share, but you've been here a long time, since Mickey Mouse was a young child. And in terms of the sort of the context of this case, this woman, Sarah Boone, allegedly, well, she said she zipped him in there, but murdering him, second-degree murder charge here, by being zipped inside a suitcase. How do you compare this to some of the other high-profile cases that Central Florida has seen?
We've sure had our share of them, and you're right. I've been here a long time. I was actually born here 25 years ago. We have our share of them. It's pretty remarkable, actually. All the high-profile cases that Central Florida has seemed to gather, everything from violent crimes to fraud cases and across the board. There's hardly a news cycle that we don't find ourselves in the news. With this said, this is a unique one. It captured the nation's attention. In fact, it's interesting. We've become a little weathered here, and it did not hit the local news as much as it hit the national news. And the local news actually followed the national news. You all were covering it before it was really picked up locally. And then once it did, it got legs, and here we find ourselves. It's just one of those, bizarre things. I don't know if it's in the water or too much sun or what, but we sure have our share of them. And this one is particularly gruesome because, the man who was in the piece of luggage, that was nothing more than torture. It's suffocation. And when you see her on the video and then you compound it with the number of lawyers that she's had, and the almost arrogance that she's approached the courts with, it draws even more attention, to already a high profile case.
Ryan Vesio, same question for you. You've been in this area for a while. By the way, Mark, how often do you meet someone who's born in Orlando? That's got to be somewhat rare, right?
Yeah, it's becoming more and more rare. Everybody wants to be here, and when those of us who are natives get together, it's really 1 degree of separation, because it really was a small southern orange grove, and now it's not, and it's pretty remarkable to see what's happened. It continues to happen here.
Wow. I'll date myself. I went on a senior high school trip, 1987, to Disney World, and it poured for 3 days. For 3 days, it poured and it was ice cold, but we still had fun. We were bouncing around. But Ryan, to you, thanks. Obviously, Mark and Ryan's first time on their show, and I feel totally out of sorts. So apologies to both of them, but we will get it right, and we will. I'm just dealing with the technical stuff behind the scenes. But Ryan, to you, same question. I mean, in terms of kind of the depravity of this case, someone being zipped into a suitcase and left to die. Sarah Boone, reportedly went to bed that night and then calls her ex-husband the next day before even calling 911, which took a while. Where does this rank on the oddity scale for Central Florida?
Well, and I'll tell you, you have 2 native Central Floridians here, and in full disclosure, Mark and I have known each other at least my 20-year career and have handled cases together and against each other. So, Mark hit the nail on the head here. I worked in the Orange County State Attorney's Office for 15 years and handled homicide and death penalty cases for about 12 of those years. So I've seen a lot of homicide cases in Orange County come across my desk then. And using a weapon of a suitcase is definitely unique. Now, for your viewers, there's no shocker that initially a suspect tells a story that makes no sense, and then it evolves and ages like fine wine over the 4 years that it takes to get to trial. So from that regard, we definitely have a defendant that wants to make it all about her, and that's what's going to make the trial so fascinating.
Jessica Mishali, there's a question here, and I don't know if you know the answer. Is it now too late for the plea deal that since jury selection has begun? Of course, we're going to get into this a little bit, but Sarah Boone was offered a plea deal, and she's already served 4 years and change. She would have served maybe 8 years and then been a free bird, but most people think she's going to be convicted here and possibly face life. So question number 1, is it too late? And I guess number 2 is, what the hell was she thinking?
Regarding question number 1, legally, it's not too late. A plea can be struck any point up until the jury returns that verdict. So I've been in many trials where we pled the case mid-trial, way further than where they are right now. But it is up to the state whether or not they want to continue to extend that. So they may have revoked it. Even if they revoked it, her lawyer could call them and talk to them. There's a reason they offered it to begin with. And they may be willing to offer it again. So that would be up to the state attorney's office. What was she thinking? We've heard a little bit about this already from our guests today. And I totally agree with what they're saying. And what I see and what the world sees is someone very difficult. Since I've been doing this for so long, what I see is possibly some mental health issues that are causing her to be so difficult. I'm not a doctor, and that's not to say she's not competent to be in court. But there are definitely some issues playing, because the difficulty that she is portraying makes her very unlikable, and it is working against her. What she wants is to win, and she wants the best lawyer, and she wants a different lawyer and a different lawyer and a different lawyer, and she wants them to do all kinds of different ideas that she comes up with. But what we can see as outsiders is that she's working against herself. So that's why she rejected the offer.
Now, if I could add one thing to that, the other thing it seems like she wants is a lawyer who's going to accept what she says rather than listening to what her lawyer advises. You can keep on knocking on a million doors until you can find somebody who's just going to agree with you, whether they're giving you good advice or not. Don't know what kind of advice they're giving her, but when you've gone through the slew of lawyers that she has, it seems like she's looking for somebody who's just going to tell her what she wants to hear. instead of what she needs to hear.
Yeah, so one of the things I love, obviously, I'm a former Fox News correspondent, about going to stories is you get such a different sense of what is happening in person. So I actually took the elevator down at the very end of the day with James Owens, who's representing Sarah Boone. And I know he's not Orlando based. He comes from the Panhandle. I've got to say, just kind of a real Southern gentleman. I was on the elevator with a reporter from the Orlando Sentinel, great guy. Shout out to Silas, who might come on the show. And it was Sarah Boone's entire defense team. So she's got James Owens and then two other attorneys, and I believe a paralegal. And listen, I asked him, of course, if he wanted to say something. He really did on camera, but he said he would do it once the jury was seated. And he said he thought jury selection was going really well, and that the jury would be seated by the end of the day tomorrow. Ryan, in Florida, with a second-degree murder charge, there's only a 6-panel jury. Here, there has to be a minimum of 4 alternates. Is that throughout the state of Florida? And I guess how much easier is it going to be to seat a 6-jury panel as opposed to 12?
So it is standard in Florida that we have 12-person juries only for first-degree murder cases and criminal cases. With that being said, it's going to be substantially easier for a couple of reasons. Over and above just the fact you've got to pick fewer people. What you see in jury selection in cases like this is, as jurors don't want to be on the panel, they start adopting some of the statements that their fellow jurors are making when they get reactions from the attorneys. So you start to get this wave effect of parrots there in the courtroom during jury selection. So I do suspect that they'll get the jury tomorrow. And as you pointed out, the judge wants at least 4 alternates, which makes sense given the fact that the state believes it's going to take 3 weeks to try the case.
Mark, I did not know this, but Jenny Moody, doxing you is the word they use, the kids use these days. Mark Najami, Runway to Hope, raises money for childhood cancer. Love him and his wife. I'm a director at Advent Health and thankful for the work for kids with cancer. Happy to see him on STS. Kudos to you. Tell us a little bit about Runway to Hope. And if someone wants to help, we've got a very generous community. It's given me chills. I'll tell you why, because I'm going to make a really long story short. When I was an investigative reporter at Fox 5 in New York, I had one couple come to me. Their child was diagnosed with cancer, and they approached the Empire State Building. You know, the Empire State, they turn colors for every imaginable thing. Like the Giants win, they turn it blue. It's India Day, they turn it red, green, whatever the other color is for the Indian flag. You get what I'm saying. Anyway, they went and said, look, can you please turn the Empire State Building yellow for Pediatric Cancer Awareness Month, which is in September. And the Empire State Building said, get lost. So we started a campaign at Fox 5, and they never turned gold, but we got every other building in New York City, major landmark, pretty much Times Square went gold. And every other big landmark, Coney Island went gold. And by the end, we had thousands of parents there who were, whose kids either had succumbed to cancer or had childhood cancer. So this story really hits home with me, and kudos to you, Mark. So now that I took up all that time, what is Runway to Hope?
Well, kudos back to you. We do what we can do, and we all have an obligation. Our household, the motto is, to those who much is given, much is expected. So we raised our daughters with that, and we've been blessed. It's a statement out of humility, not out of arrogance. And so my wife and I were chairing a bunch of different charities over the years, and there must have been some subliminal aspect to it. My mother was the first. We talked about old Orlando. There was one pediatric oncologist in Orlando, and my mother, God bless her, she's passed. She was his lab assistant. So it was the two of them when Orlando was in Orange Grove. And I think that must have left some sort of impact on me. And then we had 2 daughters who our world's centered around. And we said at some point, we can do this. We were chairing another childhood cancer charity, and it was very corporate, and I'm not a good corporate guy. So with that, we said, let's do it. And thankfully, we didn't know much about the politics of healthcare at the time. And we said, we're going to get all the hospitals together. And we did. And, Jenny, thank you from Advent. They've been amazing, the work that they do for children and for people around Central Florida. And so what ended up happening is we created this event. And the next thing you know, it became the largest charity event in Central Florida. And it's expanded and expanded. We've raised over $11 million for children with cancer. Our annual event has about 2,300 people showing up, with about 100 kids with cancer walking the runway with local and national celebrities escorting them. And it's kind of, remarkable. And we have a family assistance fund that provides direct support to the families. I didn't know you were going to give me this opportunity. So, you might have to extend the show another hour or two. But the fact is that, the community has truly come together. All three of the children's hospitals in Central Florida all work together, which is really unheard of and somewhat remarkable. And to all their credit, they do that, all the healthcare providers. And our event this year is going to be, next year is going to be, I think, May 5th or 6th that weekend. And then anybody can go to runwaytohope.org and learn more about it, make a contribution and follow it. And you'll do a lot of good. My wife who runs it, we receive no compensation. She won't even let us get reimbursed. She wants nothing on the books to show we ever got a penny on the books from anything. So we donate all of our time and our money and our resources and have a phenomenal team. So, and I'll say one last thing, that families who are having a child with cancer, it's hard enough for most families to be able to take care of themselves and their finances. But when you have a child and you're fighting for their lives, one parent's typically not working, finances are in chaos, and all the other matters, the other children and your job and your career and your mortgages, a lot of them get left behind in some way. So the charity really helps them directly, and as well as gives to the hospitals for all the research and work that they do. So it's thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Sorry to go on so long, but
no. I know how it is, and I know I'll get hate mail saying, "Why are you talking about Sarah Boone? Some things are more important than true crime or Sarah Boone." This is one of them. This is the address here, Runway to Hope, and shout out to little Sally Sunshine. She's the one who started the movement to turn Times Square gold. The Helmsley building, all these, the Chrysler building, they all turned gold, in the Empire State Building, what itself. Brooke here, praying for all the children fighting cancer, is the worst. It's difficult to talk about. It is so horrific that any child would have to go through that. And shout out, by the way, to Ronald McDonald House in New York City. They put up a lot of kids there, and they do amazing work. To the point that Mark was just making, once you've got that burden, for lack of a better word, it is so hard to just take care of your family, let alone your child. So they do amazing work, as so many others do. Now, switching back to Sarah Boone. It's a 6-person jury that they're picking here, as we said, a minimum of 4 alternates. Jessica, to you, if you're defending Sarah Boone, and you said you would have, and you wouldn't have gone with this crazy defense, who are you looking for in the jury pool? I can tell you, I saw the second group of 50 today, and I tweeted out, it looked like a New York City subway that I used to take. I mean, just a total cross-section of humanity, from 18, skateboarder kid who's like 18, up to late 70s. So who are you looking for here? Do you want the skateboarder on there?
That's funny. That's actually a good sign, right? As a defense attorney, that's the kind of group I'm looking for personally. I don't see those enough in Palm Beach County, Broward County. Miami's a little better. So, you're asking me that question, but I would not be running the defense the way that her defense team is. So if I was defending her, I would be focusing on the facts of what happened. She said right away she fell asleep. These are 2 people who choose to engage in substances and get freaky, right? And they're adults and they can do that. And they were doing that. And as part of their little game, he was in a suitcase, and unbeknownst to either one of them, she fell asleep, right? She fell asleep and she woke up, he was dead. Now, these are things she's kind of tied to because she's said them already. And while I understand and agree that these will change, right? The things that the defendants change, which is why all defendants should not talk. Attention, everybody. If you are approached by police, do not speak. Do not speak at all. no matter what. Right. So yes, I agree. It can change and it evolves and it kind of goes places from there, but that's not a good thing, right? The more a defendant, once they've talked, can stick to that story, that's a good thing. So that's where I'd be going with this defense. And I'd be looking for like-minded people who seem like they do get kind of into that kind of partying lifestyle, people who do seem like they're into this sort of, I'd be choosing like, P. Diddy's friends, you know what I'm saying? Like those kind of people, young or old, doesn't really matter, but those kind of people. So that's what I'd be looking for. Right now, I think she's in a bind because I think that they're putting forth a defense that doesn't fit, doesn't make sense. And when you do that, you lose a lot of credibility from in the defense, right? When you look these jurors in the eye and you tell them, this is what it is, and it's something that they can't get on board with at all. I think
I mean, Jessica, you and I talked about this. Why doesn't James Owens just say, look, they were drunk, they were wasted, she fell asleep, she passed out, and it was just a horrible accident? Why are they not going with that?
It's hard to say. I mean, everybody's been talking about how sort of commandeering she is, right, with her defense, and that she's driving the train. And I don't know if that's the case with her current attorney. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if it's his choice or it's her choice. But that's what I would go with. And sometimes the simplest thing is the easiest thing and the thing that would work best. I saw some faces and I get it too, that it's kind of hard to believe. And a lot of people are never going to believe or acquit her just because she says, oh, I fell asleep. They can't do that. This is too horrifying. This is too terrible. This is too sad. This is too tragic. And I get that too. But I don't think coming up and saying, oh, she's a victim of domestic violence and she's a battered spouse who was defending herself while she was asleep is really going to help the situation.
But I think also, Joel, I think there's two other points here that are Florida law specific. The first is voluntary intoxication can't be a defense. So she has to walk a really fine line, with a defense of, I got drunk and I saw this all the time as a homicide prosecutor, where if she were to come in and go along with Jessica's line of, we were messing around and being freaky, she's almost falling on the sword for a manslaughter there, because she did something intentionally that was more than merely reckless. And from my experience, very few defendants have the foresight to come in and maybe take it on the chin for a lesser crime that in this instance would get her out in 7 more years when she's just turning 50 and can have a life, as opposed to rolling the dice here on 22 and a half to life.
Yeah. I mean, if she's convicted, and by the way, it's got to be all or none with the jurors, right? It's got to be all 6, deciding one way or the other. But what's your guess, Ryan? If she is convicted, I think she's going to get a harsh sentence, won't she?
Yeah, I don't think the judge in this case gives her life, per se, just because judges are pretty reluctant to do that on seconds. My guess would be this judge comes in somewhere between 35 and 45 years, which becomes tantamount to life. Even if she's given the bottom of the sentencing guidelines, she gets 22 and a half. She's been in 4. She gets 15% credit. So she's still looking at 15 years. So that puts her in her mid 60s. So, really in the Department of Corrections as a homicide, convicted defendant, anything more than about 65 years of age is really a life sentence.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy that she's not taking this plea deal. I mean,
if I could add,
Mark, please.
No, I'm sorry. And it's clear she's wanting to go all or nothing, because, manslaughter, and she's kind of hurt herself because manslaughter suggests no malice, and that was on the table. Well, the comments that we've heard on the tape suggest there's malice there, which now elevates her up to second-degree murder. So she's really, if she's not going to take a deal, which it sounds clearly like she's not going to, then she's going all or nothing, and that's just the way it is, because the tape would suggest malice. This is for what you've done to me, and now you know what it's like, or words to that effect. Then she goes upstairs. If in fact she didn't say that, she'd have a better play for manslaughter because, it was recklessness. It was, but it wasn't done with malice. But with that, it thrusts it into second. So she's throwing the dice of getting, going all or nothing. And that all she's got left as far as the defense, if that's what she's doing, is a battered spouse syndrome, because anything else is going to land her some sort of incarceration that's significant.
So I want to get to that. There's stuff to talk about with the jury today, trying to select to impanel a jury, which we'll come back to. But since Jessica only has about 15 minutes, Jessica, explain to us. I mean, it sounds obvious, but from a legal standpoint, what is the battered spouse syndrome, which is what we believe James Owens, Sarah Boone's defense attorney, is going to use as her defense?
So battered spouse syndrome is not a defense itself. The defense is self-defense. So within the realm of self-defense, if a defendant is saying they defended themselves, they can bring up something called battered spouse syndrome. And what battered spouse syndrome is it is a way to explain how the brain of a person who has been the victim of repeat domestic violence would change. When we're looking at whether or not somebody defended themselves, the question is, did they reasonably believe that they were in imminent risk, right, of great bodily harm or death? So when looking at that, a victim who is a battered person who has been the victim of repeat domestic violence would have a different perception of whether or not they're afraid at that moment. So when you look at a situation and you see, for example, somebody shoots an unarmed person, it seems to all of us, well, they weren't in any kind of danger, certainly not an imminent danger at that moment. But a person's perception would be reasonably different if they were a victim of repeat domestic violence. And based on their situation in that moment, they may have reasonably believed that they needed to defend themselves at that moment. So that's what the syndrome is. And so my issue that I take here in this case is that she's already said that she went to sleep and fell asleep. She wasn't acting in self-defense. I don't think the hybrid of sort of saying, well, she made these nasty comments because of battered spouse syndrome, and then they have to contend with her falling asleep, right? It's going to be very difficult for them to now say she was defending herself. She already said she fell asleep. So those issues that we're kind of discussing here, well, now she has to deal with the fact that she was voluntarily intoxicated. Those are not going to go away. Right? They're there in the evidence. She can't take those away. I think adding in this battered spouse, it doesn't make any sense at all. It doesn't fit, even if she was battered. So it's not so simple as saying, well, okay, let me prove that she's been battered. Let me prove there's been some domestic violence here. That's not enough.
Lee wants to know, it's kind of, it makes no sense. I'm not a lawyer, but have Mark and Ryan, have you tried a case in front of Judge Michael Kraynick? Watched him up close and personal today. Definitely got a command of the courtroom. Likable, but no nonsense. Have you been in front of him?
I've been in front of him both in criminal and civil court, and he is no nonsense and straightforward. I've not tried a case with him yet, but he's got the perfect demeanor and temperament, I think, for a case like this. And you saw that through some of the pretrial items where he gave Sarah, all of her due process rights, but then also kind of put his foot down and said enough is enough with some of this. So I think he's a good judge to try the case.
He seems, this is, I think the second judge, but he seems to have control of the room for sure. To Mark on this one from Rosemary Romero, is a friend of ours outside of Toronto. Is Sarah Boone going to take the stand, particularly with this defense? Should she take the stand? Most criminal defense attorneys say don't ever take the stance, but I've heard several say that she has to in this case. What do you say, Mark?
Yeah, I have often taken opposite positions from many of my brethren or my peers. You've got to read each case separately, and just to have a blanket position, my clients never take the stand, or the lawyer never talks to the press, or we always talk to the press, or we always take the stand. You got to evaluate it. She's going to, in great likelihood, come across terrible. And it's one of the things that we look at, the strength of a witness, the strength of a defendant, the strength of our client, about whether they should take it. And all we know is from what we pick up from the video and the press reports. But, logic suggests that she is going to be a horrific witness. But without her taking the stand, there's really no way to explain this away. So, hopefully her lawyers have got a measure of control. She obviously, or seemingly, trusts this one out of the 10 or 20,000 lawyers she's had. And then she's at least following his advice, hopefully. But if from what I know, we never know everything when we sit on the sidelines. But from what I know, I would likely have her take the stand in this. I don't see any other way that she can explain away the situation. But she, by every appearance, is going to be a horrific witness, and it could be the nail in, the last nail in her own coffin there. But
don't you think, Jessica and Mark, she almost has to take the stand to get the self-defense instruction? Although the Joel, Florida case law is pretty clear that there has to at least be some evidence of self-defense before you get the instruction. And to Jessica's point, if she had claimed that right out of the box, then I think she gets the instruction all while sitting there and being quiet. But since she's changed her story so many times, unless they can backdoor in her statements, I think she has to.
Yeah. So Jessica, what do you think? Because you're the one that just tried a case like this. By the way, Ned Smith teasing this up, as Joel mentioned, her hair, makeup, outfit yet. There was a wardrobe malfunction, but not the kind you're thinking of, not the Janet Jackson kind. I'll tell you about it in a little bit. But Jessica Mishali, will she have to take the stand?
So it depends, right? So I think you're right about the instruction. In order to get the self-defense instruction, and it doesn't matter if it's battered spouse or not, just to get the self-defense instruction, which is an amazing instruction. It's a beautiful instruction for a defense, right? It's just beautiful in Florida. So in order to get that, you have to show a prima facie case of self-defense. You have to put forth some evidence that there was self-defense. Now, in many cases, what I've seen is there are outside witnesses. So if she has a friend who can come and say, I was over there and he punched her in the face after she talked back to him, whatever the case may be, if they have evidence of domestic violence between the two, then that can be used maybe as the prima facie case. And she doesn't necessarily have to testify. But I do agree here as well that, it's going to be very hard for her to win over the jury on any side of the defense, whether it's the fell asleep, the battered spouse, all of it really needs explanation.
Yeah. And if I could add on to that, you've got to establish a cycle of violence. So as was just pointed out, even if he punched her in the face and one person saw that, that's not going to establish a cycle of violence. It could suggest vengeance or something else, which are not the defenses here. So unless there's a number of people or an ongoing witness who could suggest that this has been an ongoing cycle and they can testify to that, I don't see where she has any option, presuming that she's going all or nothing, and that's going to be her defense, to take the stand and explain the cycle of violence as she perceives it and as she believes it existed.
And Mark, there was a couple of domestic violence incidents where they were both arrested. She said that he kicked her. He said that she strangled him, but that's not enough, right? I think that was in 2018. And then he was arrested a couple more times, I think, in 2019. But that's not enough for the cycle you're speaking of. And it also dates back to 2019. Well, this happened in 2020, but is that enough or no?
It could fill in the blanks, but you still need to be able to establish a cycle of violence and not an occasional one. And then you have to jump into the fact that she was in imminent fear. And so you've got all those pieces that have to converge to establish a viable defense.
Shout out to Black Widow, comes to us from the Republic of Ireland, lest you think we are not a global show. In fact, we are. Got people from all over curious about this case. Jody Harrington, look at this, a question from me. Can you tell us what she looked like in street clothes and also what her demeanor was? It's always interesting to see people in real life. She's much smaller than I thought. Actually, I thought she was going to be a bigger woman. She's kind of slight framed, maybe 5'3", I feel like, 5'4" tops. And she was wearing a black it was like a mismatching black on black or navy blue on navy blue that weren't an exact match. And it was a blouse, a blackish blouse, and like black, almost like chino pants. But then when you look down to her feet, and we found this out later in the day, she was in her prison like slides, like the flip flop things, with big white tube socks on. Her legs are shackled. It turned out that I guess the wardrobe malfunction I'm speaking of was she did not get her clothes delivered. So there was a last second race to get her dressed, and then they talked about it at the end of the day. And James Owens mentioned a couple of things. Number one, he wanted her to know for sure that she could get dressed at the courthouse, which the judge said she will allow. Couple interesting things I'm sure are not interesting to the panel, but to me they were. Since she's in jail for a 9 a.m. court hearing, they wake her up at 2 a.m. to get her ready. And then she's still at the courthouse till about 9 p.m., even though the day ended at 5. So an extra 4 hours. And he was worried that she wasn't going to be able to shower, and he wants her to be able to shower. Ryan, is that surprising to you, or no? That's typical.
Well, it seems a little far-fetched on the ends. Normally my experience was defendants were getting up in the 5 a.m. range, and somebody like her is going to have special transport back to the courthouse. And believe me, if there's anything that the sheriff's office hates, it's paying overtime to deputies. So they're going to get her back as quick as possible. One other thing that I noticed, Joel, is, and I think it's demonstrative of how vain that Sarah is, in all the murder cases I tried or sat in on, nobody had special shoes. Nobody had these special accommodations. She's seated behind the table at all times. She's not getting up and down when the jury enters and exits. Nobody can see her shoes. Nobody can see her slides or her socks. One of the tricks that the deputies did in a number of my trials was they'd come take a towel and throw it over the chain so they didn't make any sound. So, at the end of the day, she's still a defendant charged with the murder of somebody else. And all of these accommodations are very unique in that courthouse.
Yeah. By the way, no makeup artist. She had no makeup on. Her hair looked like it. She literally requested a makeup artist, so that did not happen. Jessica, I know you have to run in a minute, so I just want to give you an opportunity to get your closing thoughts. Marcia Thompson was the name of the person who Jessica just defended and got a not guilty verdict using this battered spouse defense. You said interesting things the last time, that Sarah Boone does not act like, let's say, a Marcia Thompson. If you can just kind of rehash that a little bit, and just whatever your closing thoughts are.
Sure. I think you're talking about the newspaper article, right? The Sentinel in Orlando, and they asked me about the case.
Yeah.
So, a battered spouse. So Mark talked about the cycle of violence, right? The cycle of violence is the heart of the battered spouse, right? It's this cycle where there's repeat violence and it's being hurt, and then, oh, I'm sorry, everything will be okay. And then there's a honeymoon phase, and then you're hurt again. And this goes on and on. And the research does show that it can even be as little as just 2 incidents, depending on the incidents. It doesn't apply the same way to every single person, because everyone's brains and feelings are different. But the battered spouse is someone who is agreeable. They're complacent. They're sort of subservient. They're not dominant. It's not a volatile relationship, right? There are volatile relationships, and those have their own effects. Like I get arrested for hitting him. The next month he's arrested for kicking me. The next month we get into a fight at a bar, and it's volatile. It's back and forth. The battered spouse is not in a volatile relationship. The battered spouse is always the victim. The battered spouse, until the incident, which is relevant when we get to court, until that incident, the battered spouse has done nothing. And the comments that you hear Sarah Boone making and the way that she's speaking to him, she does not behave like a battered spouse. The way she behaves in court, the way she treats her lawyers, the way she talks to the judge, the way she speaks up for herself, she's not behaving like the battered spouse. She's not a battered spouse. I don't think that it would be believable to say anything different. Now, again, the comments she made and things like that, I think can be explained away and sort of, this is how they dealt with each other. This is how they talked to each other. This is when they, got freaky and they were doing things like that. They would treat each other this way and they would do things like this. And that's a different story, but it doesn't relate to battered spouse. That's not what it is.
Thank you for that explanation. That is Jessica Mishali, criminal defense attorney out of Boca. Jessica, thanks so much. And we'll get you back on probably this week to keep discussing it once they see the jury. So thank you.
Thank you guys so much. And so nice to meet you guys. This has been great. I've learned a lot.
Well, congratulations on your win.
Thank you so much.
So Mark, let me ask you a question. I was getting nervous with first time guests, but we usually go about an hour and 15. So a little bit more to go. But Mark, people are asking, number one, there was this plea deal, which I think her attorney wanted her to take, but she was steadfast. And that's at least according to some of the reporting. But I saw James Owens, her attorney, with my own eyes today, and he seems like a reasonable guy. That's all I'll say. My question is, I'm not so sure he even believes in this defense. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure he doesn't. So what kind of predicament is that for a defense attorney where, she wants to go with his battered spouse and, he might be questioning it himself?
Yeah, well, you're representing your client. And if your client tells you one thing, and even though you don't believe your client, you have every right to proceed with that, even if you don't believe it. However, your client tells you one thing and then says, I'm going to take the stand and say something else, that's unethical, and good and ethical lawyers won't permit that. And so the fact is that we don't have to believe our client. What we have to do is do our ethical obligation, our constitutional obligation, to provide them an effective assistance of counsel and give them our best without lying. Now, a lot of lawyers take a bad hit, and some lawyers are unethical, as Ryan well knows, and you're not going to meet a more ethical lawyer than Ryan. Like you said, we've had many cases over the years. And the fact of the matter is, good lawyers want to be against good lawyers because they know how to read a case. And most of the time, they can work things out. You've got me here, I've got you there, and it's very few cases that everything goes slam dunk. There's always going to be some issue if you've got good lawyers on both sides that create a seed of doubt on both sides where something could happen. I suspect her lawyer said, this is in your best interest. He probably put it in writing to her saying, I'm recommending that you take this plea, and these are the reasons. And at least he's covered himself in the event, and presumably she gets convicted. That's just what good lawyers do. But when she hired him, I suspect strongly she said, we're going to trial. Will you agree that no matter what, we're going to go to trial? And he probably said yes. And if she said that, and he covered himself and did all the depositions and all the discovery and all the investigation that good and great lawyers should be doing, then he's done everything he could do, and he's simply marching forward as is his charge.
I was going to say what's in the water in Orlando, but maybe it's the oranges. Teen Bean showing us here that Stefan Stearns, he was in court today, not far from where I'm sitting. His trial now set for September 22nd of next year. That is a case that is just a horror. And he's facing a death penalty. And I won't tell you that I think he deserves it, but he does. I just told you. So if he's convicted, which I think he will almost certainly be. Ron, back to what Mark was just saying. He's assuming that James Owens put this suggestion to take the plea deal in writing. If he did, which he probably did, does that, if she tries to appeal this under ineffective assistance of counsel, does that have him covered then?
Yeah, it goes a tremendous way in protecting himself. I think this is a scenario where it's a good prosecution case, and the defense attorney does have to cover themselves for ineffective assistance of counsel, especially in Florida, because if a defense attorney is found to provide ineffective assistance, they have to be referred to the bar for professional ethics investigations. You know, in this case, it comes down to the plea offer being a sweetheart deal. And I understand why there's some reasons why the state offered it. I've worked with both of these prosecutors. They're great attorneys, but it was a real good deal. And there were lots of reasons for her to take it. But a lot of times defense attorneys have to cover themselves at the end of the day, because no one client is worth your bar card or the decades of reputation that you've built.
That's an excellent point. That is for sure. So Mark, I just want to talk a little bit about jury selection, because that's what we're going through today. And Ryan sent a funny note, which I won't read, but basically say it's torture to sit through, which in some ways it sort of is, but I think it's actually pretty fascinating just to watch. By the way, someone was asking me about Sarah Boone in court, and so she's got her attorney. This gentleman with his back to us right here is her second chair. I don't know his name yet, but that is her second chair. This the bald man in the blue suit standing next to the sheriff's deputy. So she was talking his ear off today. Like, what this gentleman's also counsel. I'm not exactly sure, the man in the red tie there. And then there's a blonde woman who I believe is a paralegal that's with them as well. So that was the crew today. But Sarah was kind of relentless. Oh, this video is from today. Okay, so Sarah was kind of relentlessly talking in his ear. I don't know what that was, but it's kind of relentlessly talking in his ear. And then at one point, she handed James a note. He read the note and just crumpled it into a ball. Mark and Jamie, she likes to talk, and that's an understatement. How aggravating is it as a defense counsel when the client, and she thinks she knows everything. She's even said it. How aggravating is that for a criminal defense attorney if you've got to know it all as a client, which is maybe why she's on her ninth attorney.
Extremely. You do want to hear from your client, and have them pass you a note, or if there's a particularly important point. You do want to hear that because you're working as a team. However, trials are exhausting. You have to, people go, "Oh, you're just sitting there for 8 hours and you're asking questions." No, you're up all nights and preparing, and you're going through every possible scenario. And if you care, and if you're a top trial attorney, and it's exhausting, you can't miss anything. A trial, a witness can turn on a word, and if you miss any of that, you lose the opportunity to seize the opportunity, or something gets by you that you can't let get by you. If you're prepared, this stuff. You're not supposed to ask any questions that you don't already know the answer to, and so that's just good cross-examination 101. So the fact is that if that lawyer is fully prepared, and I suspect they've got reams of letters and notes and everything else from her and all the hours that was spent, he knows his case. So if there's a point that's particularly important, great, but you got to let your lawyer do what your lawyer does, and that is try your case.
Here's a super chat or super sticker or super chat from Jen Ken. Shout out to Mark and Jamie for your charitable love. There you go. She's always very generous.
I don't want to leave Brian out of this. This guy's got a heart of gold, and he can tell you his own story. So I'll take all the attention for the kids and run away to hope. But you've got a big, generous guy with a big heart up here also. So I'll throw that in.
I appreciate that, Mark. It's a good thing this is recorded, so the next time I'm in battle with you, I can replay this to share your words.
By the way, Ryan, everyone is saying that you're a Vince Gill doppelganger. Do you get that often? Are you insulted? Are you flattered?
I am flattered to be marked with somebody who is successful. I will let you guess whether or not my voice is better than his or not.
There you go. So Ryan, kind of just walk us through in the Orange County Courthouse. So 50 potential jurors came in the morning, 50 came in the afternoon. I believe 15 made it through the first go around, and there were 13 remaining from the second go around. The judge is asking the questions like these. Number one, has anyone seen any videos about a man in a suitcase? A lot of people surprisingly have said yes. Has anyone commented on social media about any videos of a man in a suitcase? Has anyone seen a video of Miss Boone being interrogated? So he's going through all these questions with all these jurors, and they're all given like a paddle with their number, and if there's a thing, they raise it up. Just talk to us about what's happening right now, and how they're going to whittle this all down to 6, presumably by the end of the day tomorrow.
Yeah, so in Orange County, they will call the jurors up 50 at a time because that's, as you saw, that's all it can fit in the courtroom. And initially, and having tried a number of these high-profile cases, what the court wants to do is the court wants to weed out those that are obviously cause challenges, that they have preconceived notions because of media coverage. They've seen specific reports, or in this instance, the video, that may or may not come into evidence. So you get those, and in this case, with the trial being projected to last 3 weeks, everybody has a hardship, as I'm sure you saw today. And what the court wants to do through its initial questions is weed out the people that are obviously have some reason why they can't serve, or are clearly not able to be fair and impartial in their deliberations in the case. So it's sort of a process of elimination to where we will knock down the 50. And I think you said there's 28 today. In Florida, because this crime is punishable by life, each side on the state and the defense will each get 10 preemptory challenges that they can use, again, for any race neutral reason. And when you're looking at a jury of 10 to 12 that the judge wants in this case, once they get the panel to about 40 or 45, I think is when they'll allow the state and the defense to do their questioning.
I'm seeing Jeffrey Kaufman asking how they could contact SGS Surviving the Survivor at gmail.com. Lee Dundee comes to us from down under. My niece and nephews were the ones with cancer. Ben passed at 3. Very sorry to hear that. But Ella is 20 now and doing forensics at the university. So, Ken, that is probably the most difficult thing for any parent to go through. Speaking of that, so Mark Najami, one of the jurors who made it through part of the second round, he was being asked some questions by Judge Kraynick, and he said, in the open court, he said, a year ago to this day, my wife had an ectopic pregnancy. She nearly died, and she's pregnant again. We're thrilled, and I would like to be on this jury. Am I allowed to have a cell phone in case there's any kind of emergency? To which the judge responded, no cell phone, but I could arrange for you to have an emergency number into my chamber. Another juror said, I should say, as soon as there was a break, went to call her friend and was explaining how she'd like to be on the jury, but this could take 3 weeks and what's going to happen with her at work. These are all real people with, real lives and trying to do a civic duty. How do you make sure you're not going to get a juror that is, I guess, resentful, or a juror, this woman who happened to be talking to her friend, seemed to me like she was a little too eager to want to be on the jury. So how do you know how to kind of split the difference there?
You just do your best. The reality of it is all those considerations are real considerations. And the longer a trial goes, the longer a case goes, you're playing that. You're watching the jurors. You're reading them as best as you can. Some want to get out of there. Some are taking notes. Some are falling asleep. Some you're stuck with because you run out of challenges. And, you just don't know. I remember once that I had a jury. We thought we had a phenomenal opportunity on it. And there was one man. All the other were women. And he turned out to be an expert on the point that was in dispute. And it turned out he led the jurors. And so wherever he went, they went. And that's not suggesting anything sexist or misogynistic. It's just the dynamics that occurred. And you're always looking for a leader if you've got a chance to get that person on there. What I've always looked at is somebody who I thought was on my side, on my client's side, on our case's side, and then try to get them on there more than anybody, because there is a dynamic that it's an organism that occurs, and there's going to be a leader that typically surfaces. And if you can get that leader, you've got a better chance. That's it. I will say, though, somebody's putting up a nice little comment. I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. But the fact is they're going to seat a jury. If you can get a jury for Casey Anthony and you can get a jury for Donald Trump, you're going to get a jury. So, it's just a matter of what you got to go through and the time that it takes. It's exhausting. And then the judge has to be careful because, they become very close with the court deputies and the clerks. They all work together every day, and they've got families, and they're working late, and they're exhausted. And so you've got to make sure you keep your eye on the ball, that you control the situation. And this judge certainly seems to be doing that, rather than allowing the situation to control you. And you can get exhausted. And you got to be careful of tripping over yourself in those circumstances. Sorry, Ryan.
Hey, Ryan. Ryan, real quick before you go, look at this from Veronica. Ryan needs his own channel, very informative, and his voice is so calming. Maybe you do have a voice as good as Vince Gill. Go ahead.
Well, I'll ask my 6 kids the same question of whether I need a channel.
Hold on,
and it'll be a unanimous verdict of.
Hold on, 6 kids. How are you surviving?
Sparsely on most days, but they're 13 to 22, and they're really great. And what's interesting is, especially when I was trying homicide cases, is oftentimes they would want to hear of the cases and be involved. It's take your kid to work day brings on a new flavor when you're on call and get sent out to a crime scene where 2 meth heads had a guy overdose and they buried the deceased within a 10-foot grave, and your 13-year-old daughter is sitting there in the car while they've got an excavator out there digging away. So that's they provide perspective. But I want to touch on something, Joel, that Mark said about picking a jury is about intuition more than, I think, prescribed. I want this, or I want this, or I want this, because what helps, at least in Orange County, is when the judge asks all of these scheduling questions, it really provides cover for both of the attorneys. As the prosecutor, I was the big bad evil government looking to imprison everybody. And the state's going to call many more witnesses than the defense. And I saw a tweet earlier today about the state reading off the names of 50 potential witnesses. They're not going to call all 50, but nonetheless, a jury sees me as the government, hears a litany of witnesses, and now all of a sudden they think that I'm taking up all their time as the prosecutor. So the judge can help both sides there. For me, this is a case to where I don't want overly analytical people. I think too many jurors conflate what their job is, which is to listen to evidence, review exhibits, and determine what they believe the facts that are proven by the state beyond a reasonable doubt. So for me, I want somebody who is an HR professional or a school teacher. I actually would love a parent like myself with multiple kids in this case, because Sarah has told so many stories. And I know this from my kids. One of my sons says the other one hit him. I get 6 different versions. And oftentimes my wife and I will come down to the verdict of, we don't know what the hell happened, but it wasn't one of the 8 versions that was told. So in this kind of case, I just want people that are going to listen. And to Mark's point, I want a leader also that's going to go in there and say, enough with the crap. Let's get this decided, and let's move on with our lives.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, hop in, Mark.
Yeah, Joel. I'm anecdotally, it was a grand jury, and defense lawyers used to never be able to go into a grand jury. Mm-hmm. And the law opened up some years ago, whereas if your client was going to go appear, you could sit there. You couldn't say a thing. You couldn't object. You could just sit there and stare, but you could learn. And so I had a mercy killing in Volusia County. Lovely man, been in the military, 3 different wars, Vietnam, Korea, and World War II. Never been in trouble. He got 2 traffic tickets, one in the 30s and one in the 60s. And an amazing person. And he and his wife were failing and decided to end it. He ended up, she ended up getting killed, and he lost his nerve and didn't. But there's no question in my mind that it was love and it was a mercy killing. So I was able to sit and watch the grand jury. And I go, this is cool. We had some of those young people that you talked about earlier in there. They had funky haircuts. And I said, this is great. And sure enough, they came back, they indicted. He ended up getting probation on a plea. But they indicted. And it was interesting. It was fascinating. I got chills as I'm telling you this. 3 of the grand jurors walked out in protest. They were older men who understood mortality. And I completely missed that. But they understood getting old, being a caretaker, and losing that ability. The young people had no sense of mortality. And so they quickly indicted, whereas the older men were very sympathetic. So the stereotypes didn't work there. So you learn along the way that it's not just a cookie cutter, but you've got to really be able to hone in as best as you can, realizing that hopefully you get it right as much as you can, but you're not always going to call it right. And that was a phenomenal lesson in my career of understanding, it's just not young people with a funky haircut that you want on your jury.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And, to Ryan's point about intuition, I'm no attorney, but I am the son of a psychiatrist, may he rest in peace, and a licensed therapist. And I was just intuitively kind of trying to read the room with those jurors. There were a couple interesting things. Number one, the vast majority, to Mark's earlier point about this being a national story before a local story, I'd say like 80%, if not more, maybe 85% said they never even heard of this, which is interesting because it's here in Orlando, but most people had never heard of it. But I could just sort of sense certain people a little more thirsty, if you will, to be on the jury, and others who weren't, so eager to be on it. And just, I was kind of playing it in my own head, who I thought might be good, who might be bad, and was wondering, but there's 2 sides to the game. So, I was just kind of thinking, like, curious about how it all plays out in the end. But needless to say, it is a big civic duty to be a juror, and kudos to all those people who are sitting there heading to that courthouse to be selected possibly to sit on it.
And I'll tell you, Joel, the first question I ask in every jury selection is, when you got your summons, what's the first word that came to mind? And we've heard from A to Z, and I will tell you, I don't want people who don't want to be there because they're disrespectful of the justice system. I also don't want people that are so eager to be there that they're not going to sleep every night because they're so excited to get back and watch true crime in real life time, because it goes slower than you expect. Those are the jurors that tend to go home at night and do research outside of the judge's instructions. I wanted people that maybe weren't totally thrilled, but
hey, Ryan, I'm going to hold you up for 1 sec just because your audio is breaking up. Mark, is it breaking up for you too?
No, I'm good. I'm good. I'm hearing everything.
No, but were you able to hear? It might be me. Were you able to hear Ryan just now?
Everything.
It's probably on my end then. But so Ryan, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to stop you.
Yeah. I'll feel it. And Ryan was saying what a great lawyer and a human being that I was. So
it's true. Well, and what I really said is that if I get arrested, I'm calling Mark to represent me. So hopefully at a discounted rate. But Joel,
in the house.
I think any lawyer wants people on the jury that care enough to be there and care enough to do their job, but aren't so excited that they do more than they're asked to do, or are so unexcited that they just check out and could care less.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And it was kind of like splitting the difference there. Some people look like they just couldn't care less. Some seemed like they were a little too eager. So I guess you need to figure that out. The Fisher Price equipment always gets me. I was definitely on my end. I I even got the extra high speed internet, but who knows? Dreamcatcher coming to us from Liverpool. Love the channel, love Liverpool, and I love the name Dreamcatcher. Thank you for being here. Just to let everybody know, so I am in Orlando, if you haven't figured that out, for the Sarah Boone trial. Tomorrow I'll do my first lunch live. I'll be at the courthouse for jury selection in the morning. I'll do a lunch live at lunchtime when we break for lunch, and then we'll be doing shows every evening. Tomorrow we're actually going to double up, I think, and also do a Diddy show, Sean Diddy Combs, because shockingly there were more lawsuits filed today, and I say that jokingly, but the details of those lawsuits are sickening because it's more minor children. So I think we're going to do a second show regarding Diddy on that one. So, by the way, I don't want to drag you guys into the world of Diddy-ness, but Mark Najami, you got enough legal insight. Do you think there are all these other big names being tossed around? We've heard Jay-Z, we've heard Kanye now being. You think other big names are going to drop? Is this going to be a seismic case here that really shifts the music paradigm?
No, I think other names are clearly going to be brought in, but if you're bringing girls in, presuming they were girls, and people are having an orgy, then you don't necessarily know that they were being trafficked. So any of those other people would have terrific defenses, and they would also be, the door would be knocked on, and if they were aware of what was going on and they observed certain things, then they may be called as witnesses or provide testimony and be left alone. If in fact they were part of a conspiracy, then yes, they'll be brought in. But a lot of it's salacious because there's a lot of big names and a lot of celebrities involved. So everybody wants to throw that out there. But you could be participating in sexual activity with multiple people and have no idea that the person that you were having sex with was being trafficked or anything else, or that they were involuntarily drugged. But if you're seeing them doing a line of cocaine, or if you're seeing them drinking and you're thinking they're just in for all games, then there's a total defense there. But we don't know. A lot of this is going to be built around the people that were his intimates. Those are the people that got him the drugs, got him the girls. Text messages are the end all of most people. They're all recoverable, no matter how much you think you're destroying things. Your text, your emails, all that is being put together, and then they'll follow the leads from there. But it sounds like he didn't expect to not have a bond, and now he's sitting there with no bond and a very strong likelihood that he'll die in prison. And so when other people see that, they're going to be testifying if they can help, because they sure don't want to be in his position.
Yeah, wow. By the way, this is this attorney, Tony Busby out of Houston, that's handling these 120 people, 60 women, 60 men, 25 minors. I know we're talking Sarah Boone, but Ryan, quickly on Diddy, do you think he's going to drag down the music industry? I mean, obviously the music industry is here to stay, but other big names going to be outed here.
Oh, absolutely. He's got 1,000-pound legal anchor around his neck right now. And if he's going down with the ship, I completely expect he's going to try to bring others with him, either to claim that they're more responsible. I think that there's a remote chance here that he's going to try to argue that this is the lifestyle. Having prosecuted nobody to his infamy, but entertainers before, I've heard the defense that this is our lifestyle and this is how we do it, and which is deplorable on many fronts. But at the end of the day, he's the one who picked the witnesses to be around to see his criminal activities. And to Mark's point, some other people that have some notoriety here are put in a real tough position to either cooperate and stay on the good side, or to put obstacles and barriers up and maybe put a magnifying glass on their specific actions.
Buffalo, New York in the house as well. I think the Bills are, what day is today? Monday. I think they're playing tonight. By the way, if you want to follow me on Twitter, because that's where I'm putting out most of my observations from the jury selection process, it's at podcast STS. If you like the content, please subscribe. If you like Mark and Ryan, or even if you don't, hit the like button, hit the subscribe. It helps support the show. He was a state attorney for 15 years, managing criminal matters that included everything from high-profile murders to heart-wrenching child abuse and sex trafficking cases. Now, Ryan Vescio, who I'm happy to say that I've now met, he has his own firm. Ryan, I hope you'll come back on Sarah Boone, especially because I'm in Orlando, and if we can't get guests, I'm screwed. But I will hope that you will come back here. How does this all end for Sarah Boone?
Eventually down the road here in the next couple of weeks, she's going to get convicted of second-degree murder and go to the Department of Corrections for the rest of her life, where she should go. Anybody that was this cold and calloused, who just videotaped the last words of the victim in this case, has no place in our ordered society.
I'm thinking of multiple things, but the defense, with back to Diddy for a second, about that's the lifestyle. It's just I could see them trying to pull that, but S-ing women in that. Go ahead.
Well, and I'll tell you, in a case I had it was actually a sex trafficking case with a rapper. One of the best pieces of evidence I had in that case was his rap video that had 3 of my victims in it. So these guys are doing these things at the moment, not thinking that they could ever be touched, and they're Teflon. And when the house of cards falls, it falls hard.
Yeah. By the way, Mark Najami, he's a legend here in Orlando and elsewhere. He did analysis for Casey Anthony, George Zimmerman. He's obviously got his own criminal defense firm, and is super successful, and does charitable work. You heard children with cancer, helping to support the families. But Mark, speaking about video, it was Sarah Boone's ingenious idea to film herself suffocating her boyfriend. If the police did not have that critical piece of evidence, would there be a different outcome here? Would she have been able to say this was all an accident? Is that video what's really is that the sort of the definitive nail in her proverbial coffin?
Well, your strategy would adjust accordingly. You have to play cards with the cards that are dealt to you, and that video is a reality, and it's a damning reality. So you have to factor in. If it wasn't there, you evaluate all the other pieces of evidence, and then you develop your defense. I have to, if I might, briefly, we ended up talking about Diddy for a moment, but before that, there's been an interesting dynamic that's occurred over the last several years. It used to be that any police officer, any law enforcement officer, pretty much what they said was believed. That's changed. Body cams, YouTube, Instagram, everything has changed all that. And now if any law enforcement officer is deemed to be seen any type of misrepresentation, it can infect an entire case. And it can be large or small. There's now a distrust that goes on with a significant part of the population, that a law enforcement officer's word is not necessarily sacrosanct anymore. And that really makes a difference. So sometimes you may take an obtuse, irrelevant issue and show where it's in fact something that, they're not being truthful, and that can infect the whole case. So you're now looking at people that you thought historically might have been law and order, but now they're people that distrust anything that the government says. So some of the old stereotypes really don't exist anymore in light of what's happened politically and socially in our country. So it's an interesting dynamic that's occurring.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way. That is fascinating to hear. This is kind of a running joke. I'm not allowed to talk about my book unless someone mentions it, but
Joel, I did write a book. I want to ask you about your book. Can you tell us about it, please?
Thanks for asking, Mark. So my mother is a child Holocaust survivor, and she's probably the toughest woman I know. She lost a child. She just lost her husband, my father, of 63 years. And in writing this book, which is, if you ever read Tuesdays with Maury by Mitch Albom, it's akin to that. Mitch Albom wrote a blurb for the book. And it's basically life advice. It's 15%. My mom was saved by a nun and hidden in a Catholic school for boys. So it's 15% of that, and 85% of her dropping F-bombs, screaming at me, cursing at me, and teaching me life lessons. It runs the gamut. She talks about money. She talks about kids. She talks about technology and the 178,000 emails she has in her inbox. And it's a fun read. And I tell everybody, it will definitely change how you see life. And with what's going on in the world at this very moment, it makes me appreciate her that much more. And I don't want to make it seem like we have this, we yell at each other. People accuse us of it being shtick, but we go at it, and it's tough love, but she's the best mom anybody can have. So I know that sounds sappy. Mark, absolute pleasure to meet you. Ryan, absolute pleasure to meet you. Since I'm here, maybe we can actually meet in person. I'll be here for a couple of weeks, but would you both come back on the show to discuss this trial as it moves forward?
Happy to clear some time to chat further.
Love it. Mark?
Yeah, let me think about it. Okay.
All right, awesome. Well, listen, love you, America. Love you, Orlando. Love you, everyone out there. It got heavy tonight, but there are bigger issues in this world than what we're discussing tonight. One of them, of course, being pediatric cancer. So, just appreciate the health, appreciate what you have, and love you guys. We'll see you on the flip side tomorrow. And thank you for being here. Guests, stick around for 1 second.